I never thought one dance, just one, could shift the axis of my entire world. But that's exactly what happened one late spring evening in Savannah, where the scent of gardenias lingered in the warm air. The oaks draped in Spanish moss felt like they had witnessed 1,000 love stories before mine. My name is Grace Mitchell, and I've never been the kind of woman who turns heads when she enters a room. I'm 34. I teach ceramics at a community art center, and most days I've got clay under my fingernails and my hair in a messy bun that isn't nearly as charming as it should be. I'm not complaining. I love what I do. But when it comes to weddings, especially fancy ones, I usually feel like a dusty painting hung among diamond-studded chandeliers. My best friend, Allison, was getting married at the Whitmore Estate, one of those historic southern mansions that looked like it was plucked from a movie set. I was her maid of honor. She tried to convince me to splurge on a new dress, but I ended up wearing a deep teal gown I'd found on clearance 6 months ago. It fit awkwardly in the chest and clung too much at the hips. My shoes were borrowed, my makeup was an attempt, and my curls frizzed as soon as we stepped out of the bridal suite. Still, I smiled for the photos, held Allison's bouquet when she needed both hands, and even chased down a runaway flower girl who thought the koi pond looked like a good place to swim. I didn't expect the night to be anything more than that. A sweet memory for my friend. I certainly didn't expect him. I noticed him before he noticed me, of course. How could I not? He stood by the marble fountain near the ballroom in a midnight suit that probably cost more than my entire annual salary. Broad shoulders, dark hair slightly tousled, and a face that looked like it belonged on a billboard for luxury watches. But he wasn't smiling. In fact, he looked bored. I figured he was just another guest dragged along by a cousin or business partner. He didn't seem like the type to enjoy small talk or line dancing. I tried not to look his way again. Tried, but that's when it happened. Mrs. Whitmore, the bride's grandmother, decided I'd been standing around too long. Before I could slip away to help refill candles or check on the cake, she gently grabbed my wrist and said, "He's been standing over there like a statue all night. Go dance with him. Heaven knows somebody has to." Before I could protest, I was walking, being led, toward the man in the midnight suit. He looked up just as we approached, his eyes intense hazel, curious and slightly annoyed. "This is Grace," the old woman announced proudly. "She's the heart of this wedding party, and you've got no excuse not to dance with her." I wanted to crawl under the table. "Landon Carter," he said simply, offering his hand like a gentleman. I hesitated, then placed mine in his warm, strong, polished hand. Not a single callus, unlike mine, shaped by years of working with clay. The music shifted to something slower, something classic, and he guided me to the dance floor. I expected stiffness, silence, maybe a polite nod at the end. Instead, he surprised me. "So, part of the party, huh?" he said, that teasing tilt in his voice making my cheeks flush. "She was overselling," I muttered, adjusting my glasses. "But I do run a mean cleanup crew." He laughed softly, low. "You teach art, right?" he asked. I blinked. "How did you?" "Allison mentioned it during the toast," he said, his hands settling gently at my waist. "Said you were the kind of person who made ugly things beautiful again." Something in the way he said it made me feel like I wasn't wearing a dress that wrinkled too easily, like my frizzy curls didn't matter. "I mostly teach kids how to turn blobs of clay into mugs that leak," I replied, trying to keep the tone light. "But you love it," he said. I nodded. "Yeah, I do." We danced for the full song, then another. I forgot how awkward my heels were. I forgot how different our worlds looked because, for the first time in what felt like forever, someone was seeing me. Really seeing me. Not as a helper, not as the funny friend, not as the woman who was nice or smart or dependable, but as someone worth dancing with. When the second song ended, I expected him to nod politely and walk away. Instead, he asked, "Do you want to step outside for a minute?" I swallowed. "Okay." We walked into the garden, lights twinkling in the trees, and I had no idea that moment would be the first thread in a tapestry I never imagined weaving. Before we begin, a quick note. This video is a work of fiction intended for mature audiences. It contains suggestive themes and passionate storytelling designed for entertainment purposes only. There is no explicit content, violence, or real events depicted here. Viewer discretion is advised. If you're ready for a thrilling romantic tale, sit back and enjoy. A breeze swept through the garden, gentle but cool, carrying the scent of night jasmine and something faintly citrusy from the lemon trees lining the edge of the lawn. I folded my arms across my chest, mostly to hide the goosebumps, and glanced sideways at Landon. He had his hands in his pockets, walking slowly beside me like we'd known each other for years, and not minutes. "You don't seem like the kind of guy who enjoys weddings," I said, not looking directly at him. He smirked. "That obvious?" "A little. I came because the groom is my cousin. We grew up together. He's like a brother, really." I couldn't say no. "Still doesn't explain why you were hiding near the fountain." Landon looked up at the tree canopy above us, like the moss-draped branches held the right words. "I'm used to business galas, award dinners, places where everything is calculated, conversation, laughter, even the compliments. This felt different, genuine, a little overwhelming, maybe. That's how I feel about everything outside my studio," I admitted with a nervous laugh. "Put me in a room with a pottery wheel. I'm queen of the world. But ask me to socialize with people in floor-length gowns and tuxedos, and I turn back into the awkward art kid from middle school." He stopped walking and turned to face me. "You don't strike me as awkward." I shrugged. "That's because you didn't see me knock over a tray of deviled eggs at my cousin's wedding last year." "Legendary." He laughed again, open and real this time. The kind of laugh you don't fake for networking purposes. We reached a small wrought iron bench under one of the larger oaks. Without a word, we both sat. There was something electric in the silence that followed. Not heavy or uncomfortable, just full. Full of things we weren't saying yet. "You know," he said quietly, "I don't usually talk this much at events like this." "Me either." "I think you bring it out in me," I replied, surprised at my own honesty. His gaze lingered on me then, not in a way that made me want to look away, but in a way that made me want to hold it. For someone who had probably been surrounded by perfect smiles and curated charm his entire life, he seemed grateful, like he needed a moment that didn't come with expectations or filters. "You don't ask about my last name," he noted. "I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to." He tilted his head. "That's rare." I smiled. "Well, Mr. Mystery, you're not the only one with secrets." Landon leaned back slightly, the corners of his mouth curving. "That so got a secret identity I should know about?" "No, but I did once sculpt a bust of Ryan Gosling entirely out of recycled clay." He laughed again. "Impressive." "No, I even got the smirk right." We sat like that for a while, talking, laughing, trading odd confessions like teenagers at a sleepover. I didn't realize how much time had passed until I heard the faint sound of music ending inside the ballroom. The wedding was winding down. "I should head back in," I said reluctantly, brushing imaginary lint off my dress. "Yeah," he said. But he didn't move. "Listen, I'd really like to see you again. Not just here, somewhere without a guest list or monogram napkins." My breath caught. "Are you sure? I mean, your world and mine." "I'm not inviting your world to dinner, Grace. I'm inviting you." It was the way he said my name that made me nod. Gentle, certain. We walked back inside, and by the time I hugged Allison goodbye and stepped into the car with the other bridesmaids, my heart felt light and terrified all at once. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my small apartment, wondering what had just happened. I didn't believe in fairy tales. I didn't think men like Landon noticed women like me, at least not past one night. But something had shifted, and I wasn't sure if I was falling into something real or just imagining it. 2 days after the wedding, while I was cleaning hardened paintbrushes and gathering sketchpads from the floor of my classroom, my phone buzzed across the cluttered desk. I wiped my hands on an old apron and glanced at the screen. Unknown number, but the message. I knew exactly who it was from the first line. Hey, Grace. This is Landon. I don't know if it's too soon or too bold, but would you have dinner with me? No fancy suits, I promise. I stared at the message longer than I care to admit. I wasn't used to things like this. My life ran on routine. Lesson plans, glaze orders, and trying to stretch every grant dollar a little further. It didn't include messages from men like Landon Carter, especially ones that made my heart pound like this. I took a deep breath and typed my reply. I'd like that, but only if it's somewhere that doesn't serve things I can't pronounce. He answered within seconds. Deal. Thursday. There's a diner near Forsyth Park. Burgers, milkshakes, and bad music. 3 days later, I stood in front of my mirror debating whether my hair looked carefree or just chaotic. I chose a light blue blouse that made me feel comfortable. A pair of jeans that didn't sag in the wrong places and flats I could actually walk in. I wasn't trying to impress him. I just wanted to feel like myself. The diner was exactly as promised. Red vinyl booths, vintage posters peeling at the corners, and a jukebox humming something from a decade no one in the room remembered. When I walked in, Landon was already seated in a booth near the window with 2 milkshakes in front of him. One chocolate, one vanilla. Didn't know which one you'd like, he said, standing as I approached. So, I guessed both. Smart man, I grinned. But you're going to regret not picking strawberry. We laughed and it didn't stop. Between bites of burgers and fries, we swapped stories that didn't matter but somehow meant everything. He told me about boarding schools and summers in Martha's Vineyard, but also how he used to trade baseball cards with the gardener just to feel normal for a few minutes. I told him about summers at my grandmother's, where I first fell in love with sketching tree branches and clouds, about how I applied for a gallery exhibit once and got a rejection letter that said my work was too personal for a commercial setting. It had stung, but I told him anyway, and he listened. Really listened. There was a gentleness in Landon that you wouldn't expect from a man who negotiated multi-million-dollar developments. It was in the way he leaned forward when I talked. The way he laughed with his whole chest, not just his mouth, the way he didn't flinch when I spoke about public funding cuts and kids who used broken pencils in class. After dinner, we walked through Forsyth Park, the streetlights casting soft halos on the cobblestone paths. The air was thick with magnolia blossoms, and the distant fountain splashed like a lullaby. Do you ever wish your life had turned out differently? I asked as we passed a couple snapping engagement photos near the old oak trees. He was quiet for a moment. Sometimes, but not tonight. We stopped near a stone statue, and he looked at me like he wanted to say more, like something inside him was balancing between fear and hope. But he didn't say it and I didn't press. When he dropped me off at my apartment, he hesitated at the door. Grace, I don't want to rush anything, but I really like spending time with you more than I've enjoyed anything in a long time. His voice was steady, but there was vulnerability underneath it. The kind that made me believe him. I nodded. Me, too. That night, lying in bed with the faint scent of paint and lavender in my hair, I realized something was happening, something slow and unexpected. I wasn't in love. Not yet. But my heart was walking toward it, and it wasn't afraid. Over the next few days, Landon and I saw each other again. Nothing over the top. A quick coffee after my evening pottery class. A stroll through the Sunday farmer's market where he insisted I try a beet smoothie. I refused. He took me to an old record shop where I discovered he loved jazz. And I showed him the mural my students painted in an alley behind the art center. Raw, emotional, and full of hope. It was easy, light, real. But the more I got to know him, the more I sensed something behind his eyes, like he was holding back a truth too heavy to carry into the open. I didn't press, but I noticed in the silences, in the way he'd sometimes change the subject mid-thought. I didn't need to know everything. Not yet. I just needed to feel safe in what we were building. And I did, for the most part. Then one afternoon, as we sat beneath the cherry blossoms on my street, he turned to me and asked softly, Would you like to see where I work? When Landon asked if I wanted to see where he worked, I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew that stepping into his world meant crossing an invisible line. A line I wasn't sure I belonged on the other side of. Until that point, our time together had existed in safe, neutral spaces, places where money and social standing blurred into the background. But now I'd be walking straight into the heart of it. Still, I said yes. Friday morning, he picked me up right on time. His car was sleek and silent, with leather seats that still smelled new and a touchscreen dashboard more complicated than anything I'd ever seen. Landon wore dark jeans and a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, effortless, relaxed, but still unmistakably powerful. The ride to his office downtown was quiet at first. I stared out the window, watching the city glide by, my fingers fidgeting in my lap. Nervous? He asked gently, catching my expression at a red light. Just curious, I said, forcing a smile. I don't really hang out in high-rise offices. He laughed softly. Well, you're about to. But I promise it's just a building. The coffee is even bad. He wasn't lying about the building. From the moment we pulled up, it was clear this was more than just a place of business. It was a statement. A modern structure made almost entirely of glass and steel with a vertical garden climbing the side and a cascading water wall out front. Inside, polished marble floors reflected soft lighting and the quiet efficiency of people who moved like they were on invisible tracks. The receptionist greeted me by name, which immediately made me stiffen. You told them I was coming? I whispered as we waited for the elevator. He smiled. Of course, you're important. It wasn't the words that shook me. It was the way he said them. Like it was the most obvious truth in the world. The top floor was his. Not just his office. The Carter Group headquarters. I stepped out of the elevator and into what looked like the pages of an architectural magazine. Wide open space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Savannah. Art on the walls, modern, abstract, expensive-looking. A corner lounge area with designer chairs and a long table that could seat 20 executives. And at the far end, Landon's office. His desk was a monolith of smooth wood and black matte metal, clean and precise, just like him. There were books on urban development, environmental design, and one art book I recognized, a collection of photographs from an underground exhibit in New York. He noticed me eyeing it. I bought that one the same week I met you, he said casually. Made me think of your mural. I blinked. You remembered that? I remember a lot more than you think. He gave me a short tour. I met his assistant, Maya, a sharply dressed woman with kind eyes who gave me a smile that didn't feel forced. A few people peeked out of their offices to catch a glimpse of me, and I couldn't help but wonder what they saw. Just another woman in jeans and flats in a place where heels and sharp blazers were the norm. We ended the tour in a private conference room with tall windows overlooking the river. So, this is where the magic happens? I asked, running my fingers along the smooth table edge. Landon leaned against the window sill. More like where the paperwork happens. The magic's out there, when the projects actually come to life. There was pride in his voice. Not arrogance, not showmanship, but the quiet conviction of someone who truly believed in what he did. You don't just move money around, do you? I said. He looked at me, surprised. What do you mean? I mean, you care about the impact, about the people. His jaw tightened slightly, like I'd touched something too close. He nodded once. I tried to. There was a pause then, not uncomfortable, but charged. Grace, he said softly, stepping closer. Do you ever wonder what this is? This us? I looked up at him, all the time. And I don't have an answer. I just know it feels good. His hand reached out, brushing mine on the table. That small gesture, warm, deliberate, real, made the air between us hum. We left the office just after noon and walked along the waterfront. He bought us coffee from a food truck and we sat on a bench, watching boats drift by. It was easy again, comfortable. But that night, as I lay in bed, something unsettled started to swirl inside me. Not about him, but about how far apart our lives really were. He drove a car that probably cost more than I'd earn in 5 years. He owned buildings. I rented a second-floor walk-up with unreliable plumbing. And yet, he made me feel like I wasn't less, like I was seen, valued. Still, a part of me wondered, how long could that feeling last? The following Friday, Landon called while I was closing up the art center. My hands were still stained with acrylic paint and I had clay dust on my jeans, but his voice made the entire day feel lighter. "There's an art retreat this weekend down in Tabe," he said. "Workshops, local galleries, guest speakers. It's pretty low-key, mostly artists and weirdos. Thought it might be your scene." I smiled as I wiped my hands on a rag. "Are you calling me a weirdo?" "I'm calling you brilliant and also yes, definitely a weirdo." He paused before adding, "They're offering private bungalows, separate ones, if you're worried." I was, but not in the way he thought. I wasn't worried about where I'd sleep. I was worried about how much I wanted to be near him and how every day I spent with him made it harder to imagine walking away. "I'd love to," I said before I could overthink it. We drove down the coast early Saturday morning, watching the marshes shift from gold to green as the sunlight stretched across the sky. Landon had music playing, jazz again. And for long stretches, we didn't speak. We didn't have to. The retreat was nestled behind tall dunes, a quiet cluster of beach bungalows and open-air pavilions surrounded by sand and sea oats. Artists of all ages wandered the paths carrying sketchpads, watercolors, clay sculptures, and coffee cups. It was the kind of place where shoes were optional and time felt suspended. We spent the morning trying different workshops. Ceramic glazing for me, architectural sketching for him. I was surprised how quickly he fell into it. Pencil gliding across paper like he'd never stopped. Watching him bend over his sketchbook, tongue tucked slightly into his cheek in concentration, I felt something shift in me, a kind of affection that had depth, substance. That night, after a beach bonfire and far too many marshmallows, we walked along the shoreline in silence. The tide was low, and the stars above us shimmered like they were trying to say something. "You're different out here," I said, glancing sideways at him. He kicked at the sand. "How so?" he asked, lighter, like he wasn't carrying the whole world on his shoulders. "I guess that's what the ocean does to me," he said, then added, "You make it easier, too." We stopped walking, the waves brushing our feet, cold and soft. He turned to me, brushing a loose curl from my face. "I've never felt this before," he said quietly. "Not like this. It's not just you being beautiful or smart or funny. It's how you make everything feel honest." I swallowed. My heart felt like it was learning how to beat all over again. "And you," I whispered, "make me believe I might be worth more than I thought." The kiss that followed wasn't rushed or dramatic. It was careful, intentional, like we both understood how rare it was to find someone who made you feel safe just by being near. The rest of the weekend passed in a blur of sun, art, and laughter. He held my hand as we wandered through exhibits, stopped to listen to street musicians, and even slow danced barefoot on the porch of my bungalow when an old love song played from a distant speaker. It was magic, but even magic has its shadows. On Sunday afternoon, as we packed up to head back to Savannah, I caught Landon staring out the window of the bungalow for a long time. His jaw was tight, his fingers tapping a rhythm on his thigh. "You okay?" I asked, placing my hand on his shoulder. He nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just thinking." I didn't push, but something in his silence stayed with me all the way home. Monday morning, I returned to my normal life. Waking up early to teach my classes, organizing supplies, writing grant proposals. But everything looked a little different now, softer, like I was still carrying a piece of that weekend in my chest. Landon texted often. Photos of coffee cups, random art he saw on his commute, little notes that made me smile. "This reminded me of you. I miss the ocean. I miss you." But something had shifted. not between us exactly, but around him. There were more delayed responses, fewer emojis, a distance in his words I couldn't quite name. One night, as I scrolled through my phone, I saw his name in an article shared on a local news page. Carter Group completes major buyout of historic Midtown District. My stomach dropped. I clicked the link. My fingers suddenly cold. The article described a multi-million-dollar property acquisition, one that would impact dozens of small family-owned businesses in one of Savannah's oldest neighborhoods. The same neighborhood where my parents used to take me to church, where my uncle ran a flower shop for years. And at the center of it all, Landon's signature, his leadership. I didn't know what to think. He hadn't mentioned it, not once. Told myself it was just business, that it didn't have anything to do with me. But deep down, I could feel something cracking, something that had felt unshakable, now trembling beneath the surface. The next time I saw Landon was at a community fundraiser hosted at the Art Center. We were trying to raise money for a new kiln, and I was surrounded by students, volunteers, and parents sipping lukewarm coffee from donated paper cups. He showed up without warning. No driver, no entourage, just him holding a tray of cupcakes like he belonged there. At first, I felt nothing but warmth. He stayed close, helping with setup, chatting with my students, even letting one of them draw on his arm with a washable marker. I watched him laugh, really laugh, with a 12-year-old who called him Mr. Fancy. It was one of those moments you lock in your heart for later. But then, while I was refilling juice cups, I overheard two parents talking near the donation table. "Isn't that Landon Carter?" one whispered. "The one from the Midtown buyout," the other replied, voice sharp. "My sister's flower shop is being pushed out because of his company." I froze. The words slammed into me like cold water. Flower shop, Midtown. Landon Carter. I turned slowly, watching him from across the room. He was crouched beside a little girl, admiring her drawing of a dog with a pink bow. That same man, the one who danced with me in the dark and kissed me by the ocean, was also behind the loss of countless homes, businesses, memories. A tightness spread across my chest. I couldn't breathe. I waited until the event ended. I waited until the chairs were stacked, the lights dimmed, and the last kid had waved goodbye. Then I found him on the back steps, gazing out at the parking lot, holding a half-eaten brownie. "You didn't tell me," I said quietly. He turned. "Tell you what?" "About the Midtown deal, the buyout, the businesses you're shutting down." The shift in his face was instant. The warmth drained, replaced by something guarded. "Grace, I did. You think I wouldn't find out?" My voice trembled, but I didn't stop. "That I'd just keep holding your hand while you wiped away places that raised people like me." "It's not like that," he said. "I swear I didn't realize the full scope until." "Until when?" "After our beach weekend, after you kissed me like none of it mattered." He stepped toward me slowly. "I didn't hide it to deceive you. I just didn't know how to tell you." My laugh came out bitter and small. "You run billion-dollar developments, Landon. I'm pretty sure communication isn't your weak point." He flinched. "You think I don't care?" "I think you compartmentalize," I said, voice low. "You put me in one box, your work in another, and somehow you think they'll never collide." He said nothing. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold. "My uncle's shop is on that block. He raised me more than my own father. And now he's going to lose it all." Landon's face twisted. "I didn't know about your uncle, but you knew about the neighborhood and you knew about me. That should have been enough." He looked shattered. "I'm trying to change how things are done. I took over that deal from my father. He set it in motion years ago, and I thought I could steer it differently." I shook my head. "And did you?" He looked away. That was all the answer I needed. "I can't do this," I whispered. "I let myself believe in something real. I let myself trust you. Grace." I backed away, tears threatening to fall. "You should go." He didn't argue. He didn't chase me. He just stood there, his hands clenched at his sides, watching as I walked away into the empty building I once thought he'd help me light up. That night, I sat on my couch surrounded by student art projects I was supposed to be grading, but I couldn't see any of it. I kept replaying our conversations, the way he looked at me when he said I mattered, and all I could feel was betrayal. Days passed. I ignored his texts. I couldn't bring myself to answer. Each one chipped away at the wall I'd tried to rebuild. I'm sorry. Please let me explain. There's more to the story than what you heard. You deserve better, but I still hope it's not too late. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what to say. One afternoon, I came home to find a letter taped to my door. No flowers, no signature, just my name written in his handwriting. Inside was a check, a large one, made out to the Art Center's building fund. Attached was a note. No strings attached. Not from Carter Group. From me, for your kids, for their dreams, for yours. My hands trembled as I held it. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt something else. Grief. And maybe underneath it, something beginning again. A week passed before I let myself think clearly. It was a quiet Wednesday evening, the kind where Savannah turned golden just before dusk, and the air smelled faintly of sweet tea and rain. I sat on the steps of my apartment building, watching the sky shift, holding the check Landon had left. I hadn't cashed it. I hadn't torn it up either. I just held it. I'd spent the past few days listening to students, to parents, to the community that had built me. Word had gotten out about the check, about anonymous donations showing up at the neighborhood clinic, the after-school program, the community garden, all from a friend. I knew that friend. He hadn't been trying to buy forgiveness. He could have put his name on everything if that were the case. He didn't. He was giving without expecting anything back. And I think that's when I realized he was trying to be better. Not for appearances, but for me. That night, I drove across town to the address I hadn't visited since the beginning, the Carter Group building. The lobby was nearly empty. The lights dimmed, but I knew where to go. I took the elevator to the top floor. He was there in his office, sleeves rolled up, papers scattered across his desk. His expression was tired, older somehow. And when he looked up and saw me standing in the doorway, something softened behind his eyes. "Grace," he said, almost like a breath. I walked in slowly. "Hi." He stood but didn't move closer. He looked uncertain, almost afraid. "You came?" "I did. I wasn't sure if I'd see you again." I nodded. I wasn't sure either. Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't the heavy kind. It was full of unspoken things, of everything we'd gone through in the span of weeks that felt like lifetimes. "You were right," he said finally, "about compartmentalizing, about needing to do better. I've spent my whole life living under my father's name. And when I finally had the chance to lead, I just kept his systems in place." "But you changed," I said. "You've been changing," he swallowed. "I didn't know how to tell you the truth without losing you. And I lost you anyway." I stepped closer. "You didn't lose me, Landon. You scared me. You disappointed me. But I never stopped hoping you'd find your way." His eyes met mine, shining with something fragile. "And you did," I whispered. "You found your way." He took a breath, then closed the space between us. "I love you, Grace." The words were quiet, firm, like a vow made not just to me, but to himself. My voice trembled when I answered, "I love you, too." The moment he kissed me, I knew the past wouldn't disappear, but we'd carry it together. That's what real love does. It doesn't erase the wounds. It helps you heal them. 2 months later, the Midtown project was restructured. Landon held a press conference announcing a community reinvestment program, offering long-term leases and grants to help local businesses stay in place. He didn't make it about redemption. He made it about responsibility. The Carter Group had a new reputation, one that mirrored the man I fell in love with. And me, I expanded the art center. We finally got that new kiln. And on weekends, I started offering free workshops in the same neighborhood I once feared would be erased. Landon and I still dance sometimes. In the kitchen, barefoot, in the living room, laughing. At a local wedding just last month, someone asked how we met. I was the weird girl in the bright dress, I said. And I was the bored guy in the expensive suit, he added, grinning. But the truth is, we were both just waiting for someone who'd really see us. That dance, it didn't change everything, but it started everything. Before you go, can I ask you something real? Have you ever had a moment that felt like it was meant to change everything, even if it didn't look like much at first? Maybe it was a conversation, a smile, a single choice. Share it in the comments. Someone else here might need to hear that hope doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with a quiet step forward. And if this story moved you even just a little, join this space. Subscribe to the channel, not for numbers, not for stats, but because we're building something here, a place where stories heal, love grows, and second chances actually matter. And I'd be honored if you stayed. Don't forget to check out the video we left at the end screen. And if you love this, stop by the community tab and let me know. Should we tell more stories like this? I'll be there reading every word.